All right, I want to talk a little bit about the Country Gentlemen because they're so awesome, and because hopefully I think they're dear to Mel's heart up there. He is the closest person to the stomping grounds up there in the DC area. So I wanted to let's listen to some music from them. All right, let's start out. Since 1957, the Country Gents had been recording for Starday, creating single releases like this. Anyone, can y'all remember from a previous content and even a previous video, where might a single like this one, a 45 RPM single, have been circulated that an album wouldn't be circulating, like a 33 and a third RPM? Where would we find this that an album wouldn't be? Anyone? Bueller?
Into the in the rural parts of the country where they were targeting early country music through the different record outlets.
Yeah, right. That Rosenberg outlines this sort of class or regional difference that we see, especially with Flatt and Scruggs and their releases. But it's the case too with these singles are more popular in outside of urban areas, perhaps sent by mail order, perhaps. But another thing is jukeboxes, right? So 45s are in these jukeboxes during this period of time in the middle of the 20th century. And you don't have LPs typically in jukeboxes, in truck stops and country stores and other spots where music was circulated, and also in people's homes. Anyhow, so this is again on Starday, one of these record labels that actively was supporting bluegrass towards the end of the 1950s. And this is a single that was released in 1960, if my data is not wrong. And it's a song that you might have heard before. So let's take a listen to this. We'll stop halfway through and check in. I just want y'all to think about what we hear from the gentleman here and how we might connect it to other things that we've been reading about and thinking about. All right, let's take a listen. Red Rockin' Chair from the Country Gentlemen.
Ain't got no honey baby now, Lord, Lord, I ain't got no honey baby now. Who'll rock the cradle, who'll sing this song? Who'll rock the cradle when I'm gone, Lord, Lord, who'll rock the cradle when I'm gone? Song. I'll rock the cradle when you're gone, Lord, Lord. I'll rock the cradle when you're gone.
All right, it's like a feast of sounds for the ear. What do y'all hear that we could use to classify their approach during this period of time?
Hard driving.
Yeah, this is not a slow country song, huh? Like not a slow like Nashville sound ballad, right?
No, it's often gone right from the Mando kickoff there.
Yeah. What else do y'all hear? Any thoughts from the Jacobs?
Just the same thing that Mel said with the fast, pretty quick.
Yeah. Now, from a banjo perspective, is there something that you hear from that side? I'm not a banjo player. I'm not always the best able to distinguish some of those nuances. I mean,
I mean
can,
that particular song doesn't really, the banjo part doesn't stand out unique, like a different unique style that much.
but like it's not like out of place for this time period.
No, it's like a pretty good example of like a banjo part for that time period.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. Like in that aspect of what they're doing, they're following a pattern. It's Scruggs style playing, hard driving. They're not trying to do like something from Don Reno that would be really strikingly different, I guess, and that's significant in a way.
One thing that I noticed is that guitar playing. And one
Yes.
thing that really drawed my attention to it is just yesterday in guitar practice, Jeremy was telling me, he said, I need to listen to the Country Gentleman and how the guitar player is putting that stuff in there. And he's got a really unique way of doing his rhythm playing there and putting some runs and stuff in there.
And there's an actual solo in this song, right? A lot of people go back to like Doc Watson, Clarence White, right? Um, but here we have an actual legit uh, guitar solo, which is not something that we've had very much of at all, really, except for you remember Jimmy Rogers doing his little solo, right, in Real Skinner Blues. I think that may be the last legit guitar solo that we've really heard. So that's an interesting thing as well. Besides the like finger pick stuff that we were hearing from Lester, well, from Earl playing guitar on some of their stuff, right? Am I wrong? Have we heard any other guitar
No,
solos?
it sounded like that. It said that was 30 years ago. We heard the guitar, right? And
It's decades ago, right?
exactly.
So for
And
a
a
long
solo just on rhythm, you know,
Mhm.
I mean, rhythm with runs and stuff, you know, and rolling patterns and stuff.
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting. And I tie that into the importance of rock and roll and the guitar, the fact that there were a lot of people just throughout the musical soundscape who are playing solos on guitar. The guitar is clearly not just a rhythm instrument anymore, especially in its electric form in rock and roll and other kinds of R&B influenced musics. So I just think it's interesting that it's in there. So yeah, Charlie Waller is definitely he's putting some new twists on the guitar in here. And I want, as I, I'm a mandolin player myself, so hearing John Duffy's playing here is really interesting. It's clearly not an imitation of Monroe. It's more melodic in a way. It has different kinds of figuration, like he's filling in the time in different ways than Monroe does. So that's interesting to me. I can really hear a distinctive approach from his side. But let's keep listening. Oh, any other thoughts right now?
I was just going to say that, each one of the solos that we heard, the instrumental, were all professional virtuoso quality, right? The banjo, the mando, the guitar, right? All of them, they are at the top of their game. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's listen to the rest and see how they ended up. All right, and I want to at this point, like I think we have a good sense of the framework, the texture, how things, what the ingredients are. Listen to the song this time. Some of y'all may know this or sing it. This is one that I do with my wife when we play music sometime and with friends. But listen to it and curious what you hear about it and how you would describe how their song fits into the whole performance that they're putting across.
Hiding all I can do and all I can say, I can't go on this way. No, I can't go on this way. Hiding all I can do and all I can say, I'll sing it to your mama next payday. Lord, I'll sing it to your mama next payday. Ain't got no honey baby now, Lord, I ain't got no honey baby now.
All right, it ends with a bang. Anyone know this song? Is this one that y'all know and play and jam on?
No, I've never jammed on it.
A long time. Years ago, we used to play it, you know, but I haven't for years, you know.
Yeah, well, it's not one that has uh it's not one that's recorded like in the child ballads or anything. It's not one of those that has a documented very long history. I think it's I've seen it described by some historians as a white blues, as one of these songs that's just made up of floating verses and is sometimes part of what are called song families. If you've heard of a song called Sugar Babe, I think a lot of early versions of this song, instead of red rocking chair, they talk about someone's red apple juice, which is kind of potentially even more sexual than a red rocking chair. But it's one that I think Doc Boggs recorded. I may be wrong, but it's one that's been around, for it was recorded in the 1920s and was probably around in the common stock repertory of songs that were sung probably by Black and white people in the American South. So it's definitely got this kind of um, it's a folk song in that sense, but one that comes out of the Afro American, the African American blend of all this that includes the banjo and so on, that's in string band music. Anyhow, so it's been around for a while, but it's not an ancient song. Um,
Another
and it,
thing I noticed is that hard driving bass in there.
yeah,
Bass reaches out in front there several times in that song. You know what I mean? Where you can really hear it strong, almost above the other instruments there.
yeah, absolutely. And it's the that's definitely something that's distinctive, right? And it's not just a normal walking, but it's like a running. It almost feels like. Um, Again, that's not like the first time we've heard that kind of walking bass, but I think it does sound even more active than we've heard in some other places. Well, hey, so y'all might have seen an email that I sent just not too long ago. Someone was making some email sounds just now. Uh, if y'all have that email handy, you could open it up. Let me see if I can share my screen just in case you don't. And because they're the liner notes to the other side of their releases, and this is on Folkways. So in addition to working more in the country side of things with Star Day, they're also releasing LPs on the Star Day label, and these are the liner notes. Like I've told y'all before, they're all available on the Folkways website. So I wanted y'all just take a couple minutes, either looking here on the shared screen or on the PDF that I sent out, and take a couple minutes to read through it. And then I'd just like us to talk for a little bit about how the musicians are introduced, how they introduce themselves through this text. And this text, it kind of gives us a sense for who they are and where they're coming from. So just take a look, and we'll come back in a minute. I should have background music. I'm not going to change my screen now, though. All right, that's just too much dead air. It's making me antsy. Uh, any uh, any thoughts just on a quick look here?
One thing I thought was really unique is if you notice, every one of them's got vocals. And you know, a lot of times you just have like somebody playing just bass or somebody just playing banjo, but all four, you got four musicians there and they're all doing vocals,
Mhm.
which is kind of unusual. You know what I mean? You see it sometimes, but to have that kind of talent, playing skills and singing skills with all four of them, it's
Yeah, and that I think one of the things is you're saying the instrumental playing that we heard from the gents is so strong, and it is, but the vocals are really one of the distinctive contributions that this group makes to the shape of bluegrass music. I feel like his Charlie Waller's vocals, but then also Duffy. I mean, everybody in the group is providing a vocal contribution that really is distinctive, and how they put their voices together is really distinctive. I think they use a lot of things drawn from like barbershop quartet singing, the way they kind of snake lines around, and they'll change one voice in the middle of the texture and so on. And that's sophisticated and hard to do, and they do it really well. Absolutely. That's a vocal powerhouse band for sure.
I didn't realize that John Duffy played dobro on their early stuff.
Yeah, he's all over the place, isn't he? And I had forgotten that Jim Cox played banjo too. So uh the one interesting thing too that we have here, and notice this is not written by Pete or Mike Seeger or Ralph Rensler or one of these other people who we think of as like revivalist folklorist type people who were the culture brokers of the bluegrass related folk revival in the 1950s. These are written by John Duffy. So this is kind of almost from the horse's mouth, as it were. And it's so interesting. It's very carefully written. This is not like a Don Pierce Star Day record like sleeve text puffery. Like this is really useful, helpful biographical information. If we were looking at this as a historical document, if this was written up as a Wikipedia biographical entry like y'all were doing this semester, like this would feel really legit, especially if it had some good citations added, right? So you see Waller's from Texas, kind of from we don't really have a sense of what his background was really like. Like he doesn't say that Charlie Waller grew up in a cotton picking family, or something like that, or that his father was a tobacco magnate and he grew up in luxury or something. So we don't. It's interesting. We do hear that John Duffy's was an ardent fan of bluegrass and country music, but we don't really hear a lot about this influence from his father, who was an opera singer, which I think is interesting, right? But we do hear he grew up in Washington, D.C., which is very different than growing up in Joinerville, Texas, I would imagine, like the nation's capital versus where Charlie Waller came from, which is a smaller rural town out in the heartland of the United States. And Scottsville, Virginia, that's on the James River out in central Virginia. Not too big of a place back in 1938 when Eddie Adcock was born there. Pretty rural, I would imagine. It's a little tiny town where there used to be a ferry southeast of Charlottesville. And then Jim Cox was born in Van Sant, Virginia. I have no idea where that was, but in 1930, I can't imagine it was a metropolis. So we have a mix of different backgrounds. We have these guys from rural places in Virginia. We have Charlie Waller coming all the way from Texas. And notice when they're born, right? These guys are born in the 1930s. So that puts them almost a generation after Bill Monroe. Remember, he was born in 1911. So sorry, I took over. What else did y'all notice looking through these? Anyone else besides Bill have some things they noticed? And Jacob? Well,
It's kind of, I guess, I'm just thinking about that for a minute, Dr. B, but, think they were born like 30, 35, 36, they would be coming of age right at that cusp, when Monroe and Flat and Scruggs were all coming together, right, in the, latter part of the 40s. So here are these folks who, guys who had been 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, right? So, so you could see that's a pretty impressionable time in someone's life. And
Absolutely.
they
That's it. And that,
bit by the bug, right? They must, they got exposed. You hear this thing tying to Mac Wiseman, I think a little bit older than a few of these guys. So
yeah,
pretty interesting to think about that aspect of it.
absolutely. And if y'all have heard the name of Fred Bartenstein, he's someone who's really been involved with bluegrass for a long time. We'll talk about him next semester. But he has this whole project called Bluegrass Generations, and he looked at demographic information on a lot of hundreds of people who have been influential in bluegrass since the first generations and before that. And he made exactly that point, that a lot of these, what we call second and a half generation people, and he looks at that through generations, like up through the Punch Brothers and folks like that, looking at how old these musicians, or who was making music when these musicians were in that formative sort of adolescent period. I think research has shown that the popular culture and music that's around when you're kind of a young teenager, 10 to 15 years old, makes a big impression. And so I can send y'all a link if you're interested in learning more, but he did this huge thing with, I think, 400 something musicians. And he very carefully divides people into generations based on those kinds of things. It's a really interesting project. And it really supports what you're saying, Mel. Absolutely.
The other thing I could share is that in this area, this Washington metro area, I live in Northern Virginia, and in this area, I was struck, many years ago about the richness of our bluegrass and old time music heritage in DC. And so in 1960, they say where this was recorded, and Duffy was living over in Bethesda. It said largely lived over there, which is an affluent suburb of just over the river in Maryland there. But all these folks that have come up, they're seeking work, much like they did in Detroit. They came up into Baltimore and Washington. But this has, and I back then I've had people a little bit older than me describe it. It was always such a rich hotbed of music, and it largely continues to this day with many musicians, bands, outlets for particularly bluegrass and old time music. We have Caboma, like Capital Area Bluegrass and Old Time Music Association, and so there are a number of still associations and organizations, and just a lot of jams going on up here 60 years later to when this was occurring. So it is unique. It was kind of, you scratch your head, you think, wow, right in a major metropolitan area, you would think that, there'd be maybe not as much, but it's always been very rich up here. And these guys were certainly pushing all that. They were big. They left a huge mark on this area.
Absolutely. And, I've been reading through this book that's all about bluegrass in the capital area by Kip Lornell. Sorry, my brain is mush. It's really interesting to learn about this stuff starting in the 30s. I'm going to mention the Stoneman family a little bit later. After recording in Bristol in the 1920s, the Stoneman family migrates up to the Metro DC area. And so there's a lot of, there were at least several radio barn dance, like hillbilly barn dance shows on radio and then on TV that were running. Connie Gay was a really big influence in that media side of things. And there was a lot of informal playing. So it's a huge scene. And it's really interesting because just like in the personnel of the Country Gentlemen, there are a lot of intersections here in the DC area. We have rural and urban coming together. We have these resources like the American Folklife Center and the Archive of American Folk Song, which is one of the places that John Duffy went and found these old songs. We have people like Ralph Rensler and Alan Lomax and Mike Seeger, who are all involved with like these storehouses there at like this, that are involved with the Smithsonian and with the Library of Congress. And we have, working class people who were listening to the radio barn dances, who were carrying forward like living chains of tradition of singing these songs. So it's this really interesting combination, and DC is fascinating. All right, but we could talk about that more, but let's move on. I wanted to focus on the next song I'd like us to listen to. It's called A Good Woman's Love. Folks, I have to tell you, I did not know where that song came from. It's burned into my memory from Bill Monroe's playing, but I did not know where it came from. Does anyone, has anyone done a detailed song history on this? You can see it's this one. I was a rover on land and on sea till a good woman's love made a new man of me. It's one that I know a lot. So I'm going to come out of here. It's an excellent song. But I wanted to share with y'all what I found. Sorry, you're looking at my desktop here. Oh shoot, where'd it go? The first place I found the name of that songwriter, which we got from the liner notes, was Wikipedia. Now, of course, as we all know, we need to take this with a grain of salt, especially since this article has a tag there at the top that it needs additional citations. We all know what that means and what's involved with that. But you can see this songwriter was born in 1919, died in 2006. He recorded songs that were recorded by the Beatles. He wrote songs like I Want to Play House with You, the Never Been Kissed, Hep Cat Baby, that crazy mambo thing. All right, so this songwriter is clearly, he's an industrial songwriter of the first order. The great El Tigre, right? He's got a lot of things. He did work in Nashville. He wrote for Eddie Arnold, so he clearly was a hit maker. He was someone who could craft a tune and a text to really work. So he was there in Nashville in 1949 after a novelty hit called When You See Those Flying Saucers that came out in 1947. So I just wanted to provide y'all a little context. This is not an ancient folk song by any means, right? And so I think it makes sense that it's on this Country Gentleman record that is called Country Songs Old and New. And again, this is 1959. This is Folkways. Let's just take a listen to this song and see if there's any contrast that we can make. Again, we have a different album, a different record company that's releasing it. Let's take a listen again to these folks: Charlie Waller, John Duffy, Eddie Adcock, and the Country Gentleman, which I guess was Cox on the bass. He's the rest of the band that's not listed there. Anyhow, here's a Good Woman's Love. Oops, let's ooh, whoa, come on now. Sorry, y'all. Can y'all hear it?
She'll always care. And when the night falls and the moon shines above, I'm a man with a dream and a good woman's love.
All right, we'll pause in the middle again. Can I get a banjo check in? Like, is that triplet style that he's doing in there? Like, how crazy is that for Idcock to be doing that kind of thing?
It was definitely unique. It's not really. It's more intricate than most banjo parts of at that time, I'd say.
Yeah, or at least it seems a departure from the standard roll. Like it's a
Yeah.
different kind of triplet thing going on there.
It's kind of I know what he's doing, but it's I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not. It's more creative than anything. It's not
Yeah.
anything super difficult.
But it's
just-
maybe a different approach, maybe.
Yeah, a different approach to it.
And I think for me, I was guessing like, so here, I'm not a banjo player, but I'm going to guess that like tremolo on the mandolin, it's a different way to fill in the time on a slower song, on a waltz. Maybe.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a fair statement, I'd say.
What do you think, Jacob? Is it, get on the edge of where the melodic style banjo playing's creeping into the music more so?
Not really melodic style, but just more creativity on the melody, because sometimes the Scruggs style it's easy to get like a melody on a driving song, but part of the downfall to a lot of Scruggs style stuff is when you get into slower songs, there's a lot of empty room, and that kind of just fills some of that empty space on a slower song, where playing a straight Scruggs style wouldn't always be as intricate as what that is, I'd say.
Yeah.
So was Adcock one of the first ones to start to experiment or innovate with that type of playing in these ballad-like songs?
That's a big question. I think that's outside of our ability to answer right now. But I think we can say that he's definitely doing that, right?
Yeah.
And I guess that's what I thought was interesting here is that this sounds more like a slow country kind of ballad that the audience at Antioch College didn't like. Y'all know what I'm saying? Y'all remember that?
Yeah.
Like once more to be with you, dear, that awesome song from the Osborne Brothers. And apparently the audience of folky college kids did not like that, right? So I wonder, would they have liked hearing this song from the Gents in 1959, 1960 when this album came out?
Good put. I'd probably not, based on, they just wanted to hear, they would have rather heard Red Rocking Chair. And if they would have laid this on them, they would have been like, yeah.
So this is an interesting question, right? We can hear how the country gentlemen are able to play different things that would appeal to different people. And I think it's kind of ironic that we see the Starday release, having this, again, I just picked these two releases, but they're doing things that would appeal to folky audiences, but also to country music audiences. And here they're doing something on folkways that wouldn't necessarily appeal to all folk revivalist kind of enthusiasts. Anyhow, so we can definitely hear the vocals here. Mel pointed that out earlier, and this recording just really has that in spades. It's really powerful.
To me, it sounded like that mandolin was kind of walking between almost a bluegrassy sound and almost into a country sound. You know what I mean? It's kind of back and forth.
I think all the instruments, I would agree, Bill, for sure.
And there in that, what was about the second verse where he came in there singing, it's almost like it shifted gears completely. where he hit that high.
Yeah, when I hear Charlie Waller here, sounds much more like a country singer. Like y'all remember Jim Eanes, Smiling Jim Eanes. More of a baritone, not really high lonesome in that way, more of a crooner, and even the kind of ornamentation he's using just sounds much more like a country approach.
I guess this is really, with Duffy, right, being able to just such a powerhouse tenor singer, and just peeling the paint almost, right? And then this is one of the first LPs or albums that they really brought together the bluegrass and the folk. I mean, they really, from what we were just reading, in Rosenberg's book, I guess it was, where this was a great example of that coming together. They really did appeal to a very, very wide audience.
Absolutely. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, and it passed it on to the folks, kind of to this day, with the seldom seen carrying that torch forward, right, for decades now.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts from the Jacobs? Well, yeah, again, I think this is just I think these two songs, I picked them because they show the contrast and the range that this group had. So they were able to do things. One of the things that Rosenberg also notes that unlike the Osborne brothers, which seemed to depend on the kind of skit humor that was popular since the minstrel show days. These skits, y'all remember that Bill Monroe used to dress up like a woman. There were these blackface skits that were used on the Opry traveling shows through the 1950s. These kind of, in some ways, tired but still funny things, the kind of stuff that we heard about on the Free Show Tonight, the medicine show thing, right? There's a long tradition of that. And the Osborne brothers were apparently still doing that kind of stuff when they went to Antioch College. That also did not work with the audiences there. But what we hear from Rosenberg, which totally makes sense based on what I've heard from live recordings of the Gents, especially from Duffy, is that their humor was much more unscripted. It was much more off the cuff, and in some ways more, I cringe to say it, more real or coming from the moment. And I think that's that's one of the kinds of authenticity that audiences, especially young audiences, really prized. So young urban audiences would have been able to identify more with the country gentleman as younger guys who seemed more like normal people. Like they weren't up there doing scripted comedy, but they were just being funny as themselves. And I think that was a part of their appeal as the whole stage show, not just the songs. So that's that there were a lot of disconnects, right? And I think one of the things that's distinctive about the Gentlemen is their ability to connect, right? To think about it, in 1959, some of those students at Oberlin, where they were probably listening to Roscoe Holcomb, and some of them were really, really into like rootsy stuff that they were listening on the Anthology of American Folk Music, that obscure collection of older 78 releases from the Hillbilly recording era. But other folks were getting their earful of Frankie Avalon and Paul Anka's "Put Your Head on My Shoulder." Y'all have heard some of these things on the golden oldies. Charlie Brown from the Coasters, the Everly Brothers, Jan and Dean. Even Billboard's Top 100 for 1959 includes the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. So you get a sense of even what was on the Billboard Top 100. And also Johnny Horton's Battle of New Orleans, right? So there was a wide range of stuff that was in the mainstream, documented by Billboard. And I did want to point out that television begins to be another place where culture is shared and where it's broadcast and shaped. And DC was distinctive for bringing bluegrass into the TV realm. And did I give y'all a sample of that earlier? I lost my, and I lost my videos here. Let me play it again for y'all. So in 1956, I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I think we have time. We should at least watch some of this. The Bluegrass Champs were just amazing, and they featured some of the members of the Stoneman family.
I brought a most unusual.
And I think one of the very coolest things about this group is it's got Donna Stoneman on mandolin, absolutely tearing it up. So the Bluegrass Champs were members of they were the next generation down from Pop Stoneman, who was one of the key organizers of the musicians for the Bristol sessions in 1927 and 1928. And here we have the next generation. And it includes Scotty Stoneman on the fiddle, Donna, and then Jimmy Stoneman on bass, playing this bass that I think Dan usually has in his office here. We have that bass, potentially the one that's being used in this video. Anyhow, they appeared on this 1956 television show, Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts. And the Bluegrass Champs had been around. I've been reading about this in that DC Bluegrass book. They had been on the scene, playing at various clubs, playing at some of these places in Baltimore and other working class kind of areas where there were a lot of immigrants, as Mel was saying, to the urban areas for work, for textiles. That song, The Streets of Baltimore, a lot of folks did make that transition to the city life, to work in a factory, to work an old machine. And so the Bluegrass Champs were a part of this. I'm going to zip us through Arthur Godfrey, who's really not very exciting at all, and get y'all to something that's much more interesting. And that is the Bluegrass Champs playing Salty Dog Blues. So this is, again, 1956, a little earlier, but it shows some of the hot stuff that was happening in the DC area.
Bluegrass Champs.
Now hear it?
Stand on the corner with a low down blues, a great big hole in the bottom of my shoe. Honey, let me be your salty dog. Well, let me be your salty dog, or I won't be your man at all. Honey, let me be your salty dog. Well, listen here, Sal, I know you a run down stocking in a worn out shoe. Honey, let me be your salty dog. Well, let me be your salty dog, or I won't be your man at all. Honey, let me be your salty dog. Down in a while with a sitting on a log, my finger on the trigger, my on the hog. Honey, let me be your salty dog. Well, let me be your salty dog, or I won't be your man at all. Honey, let me be your salty dog.
All right, so it's okay. I'm going to not comment. What do y'all think? How is this different from what we're hearing from the gentleman? We could also talk about what's similar. All right. We didn't see much. We don't have video of the gentleman from this period, but we could also just talk about how these folks look. Y'all see these outfits they have on? Y'all notice the fringe that's like shimmering down all of their appendages and across the front of their torsos. They've got instruments embroidered on their breasts. This is a really a different approach, right? And I think it extends an earlier approach that's much more, that amplifies this sort of the country barn dance aesthetic, right? And this is not something they're putting on, like their parents, their dad was Pop Stoneman, right? They come by this honestly, but they're amplifying it and projecting this sense of countryness and of sort of a country westernness, right? Not something that has to do with the folk situation. It's really hard to imagine. I guess I can imagine John Duffy wearing an outfit like this. But if y'all remember the images that we had, especially the Folkways, that Folkways release cover just shows all those guys standing there playing their instruments with normal clothes on, right? And I think their normal people kind of approach is one that appealed, especially with a youth audience. This approach, which is much more, I think it ends up putting country and bluegrass music more as a novelty. Like this song is kind of a comedic novelty, hokum song. And so I think that shows a different approach. Does that resonate with y'all?
Their music's even got that barn dancey sound to it.
Oh,
Like,
sure.
a little more than the country gentle. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And you have to imagine that their father played a big role in their production, their stage appearance. You know, he was, as you say, seasoned by that point. And so he would have been very familiar with, okay, what Nashville's influence, what was the national influence and where they were coming from, what was going to take to sell them, right? So
yeah, and again, it's kind of an old-fashioned approach, one that wasn't going to resonate with the younger folk-oriented audiences in the urban setting.
Right, or play to the older ones or offend anyone in the traditional crowd. It's like, okay, this is what we're going to go with. We'll fancy it up. It's almost on the edge of those nudie suits, right?
Yeah, those are some serious outfits. So it's
a cowboy look and the bluegrass sound.
Yeah, right. And it's the kind of look that people had on the Opry, you know, and the National Barn Dance. If y'all remember from that documentary that we saw, they were wearing some outfits like that. So it's a different approach, very different visual costuming approach from the gentleman. So, you know, next semester, we're going to be exploring a lot of the ways that different kinds of people can find common ground, especially through media and through festivals. And that's going to be a big focus next semester. And the main research project is going to be on live recordings made at festivals. So I just wanted to finish up by, I'm going to see if this works. So usually if we're in person, I would do this. Oops, got my mask. Sorry. We would do this in person, but I'm going to do it on Zoom and we'll see how the Wi-Fi holds up. So if I start blacking out, just let me know. I'll go back to the office. But y'all recognize where I am here. We're going down the hallway outside of the main BLU office. And I'm going to take y'all to the venue that was used for a festival here on campus in the 1960s. Anyone been in this room? All right, so this is the actual gym. And right here, where the big E is, used to be a stage. And in the 1960s, it was the site for the ETSU Folk Festival. And folks who attended in 1968 would have heard this. That's Earl Scruggs and the Foggy Mountain Boys playing Reuben. That was their closing number for their slot at the 1968 ETSU Folk Festival.
What?
And let me
Yeah. Got a brand new album will be out in the next few days that we recorded of some of the top songs for the past year, some of our special buddies. we can remember one of them, we
So anyhow, you can hear Lester Flatt talking there in this very room, lo these many years ago. So I just wanted to give you all a hint of that kind of thing. And those are the kind of recordings that we're going to be looking at for next semester. I wanted us to just end up with a thought, like, how do we remember this history and how do we represent it? And y'all have done a great job this semester starting to actually be a part of the presentation through your Wikipedia projects. And that was a lot of hard work. And I really appreciate all that y'all did, because y'all are doing things to highlight and make accessible the history, like that history that we just heard and the kinds that we've been. So I just wanted to kind of point us towards next semester and thank y'all for your work this whole semester. And any other questions or things before we head out? And yes, we absolutely can talk, Mel. I just saw your chat. It was hard for me to type while I was walking.
Hey,
Well,
shoot me an email.
oh, sorry, say it again.
Mel, shoot me an email.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
call, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, hey, y'all, I just wanted to say thanks again for sticking with it through the whole semester, for being part of this whole effort. Let me know if there's anything I can do for y'all over the break. And I hope that you'll be considering, I haven't really looked lately at how the role is shaping up for Bluegrass History too, but it's going to be a good time. And there's a lot of really cool music and a lot of really interesting history to look at. We'll get to watch some movies, which is always exciting, and it'll be a good time. So thanks again. Y'all take care of yourselves and other people around you. And I hope that we can talk soon. Hey, Mel, you want to just stick on while other people?
Yeah, this will work well. This should work out well. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Good.
Hey, thank you, Bill. I'll hope we'll be talking some more. I look forward to seeing you soon.
See you, Bill.
And I don't know which Jacob this is that's still with us. Is it Jacob Metz or is it Jacob?
Yeah, it's Jacob Metz.
Okay, awesome. All right, I just saw Jacob. There were 3 Jacobs on the roll, so sometimes it's hard to tell.
Oh, nice.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks, man. I don't know what Mel wants to ask me about, but it's you could stay if you want to, maybe.
I'll probably head out.
Okay, cool. Thanks, man. Take care.
Bye.
Did you? Good. Hey, very good, very good. No, I wanted to tag up with you on on a personal front.